Gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Lise Lafferty, delivering on navigating hepatitis C re-exposure in the prison setting following hepatitis C treatment completion.
Thank you. So I'm Lise. I just wanted to start off by, that was such a great talk, Layla, and Yumi, and I've blanked on the names of the other two, but it's been really cool hearing about different contexts, different settings, and all the things going on. It's been really exciting for me to be here today. So thank you for having me. I also want to acknowledge that the work that I'm presenting today, it was undertaken or conducted on this is a new area for me. I only go out to this prison, so I'm not familiar with the language, so let me double check before I get it wrong. But in Australia, we have a tradition that was new to me to learn as an American, where you acknowledge the country of the place where you are going and where you are working, where you are meeting. And so I wanted to do that today. But I only go out to this one prison, and I'm not familiar with the name. So it's the Wangal clan of the Eora and the Tharawal culture. And I do know that I live and work on the Bidjigal land. And that's where this work was analyzed. And I also am just going to do a caveated disclaimer for those in the room who are seeing their names up there and have not yet seen these slides, that I take full responsibility for what is being presented today, so don't worry if you see anything rogue. And I also want to acknowledge that the fantastic contribution of Jins and Yusai, who are the pub health nurses who supported the recruitment of the people who participated in these interviews, because I could not have done this without them. And also to Tracy and Colette for linking me up with them, because it was really challenging to go in and do these interviews. Normally when I do prison-based research, it's piggybacked onto a larger epidemiological study, so there's like somebody in there already, part of the study, who can help me with recruitment. And this was really me coming in, trying to just interview people and understand about reinfection concerns. So just some basic background. This is way too short. Okay, here we go. I can see slides now. So basic background is, in New South Wales correctional centres, most people are put onto Buvidal, the long-acting injectable buprenorphine, and they get that treatment every 4 weeks. There was somebody in prison who talked about in the community, they get it 3 weeks. And on that note, I just want to point out that when you do qualitative research, what you hear may not always match with what the guidelines are, what the policies are, what we understand the nurse to be doing. It is their experience, it is their perceptions that I'm reporting today. So it may not align with what we know from a different perspective, but it's about their perspectives, and it's their perspectives that matter, because that influences how they engage with healthcare, who they engage with, whether or not they think they are eligible to engage with healthcare. And then one of the plus sides of OAT, of Buvidal, is that it reduces those daily medication lines. It also reduces the ability to, diversion to other people. I've heard lots of stories about the ways in which methadone is diverted, how much it costs for that fancy little cup of stuff you've just brought back. And people being able to use chewing gum as a way to figure out how to divert the sublingual strips. However, waitlists for treatment commencement on Buvidal can be a little bit timely, and I want to point out that that's also true within the community. So, just briefly, this project was within a bigger EPI study, but that study wasn't doing, the bit that I did was not about an intervention that I was evaluating. It was really about perceptions of reinfection in prison. And so I did this qualitative sub-study at a reception prison. And important to note, this is not at a maximum security prison. So most of the people that I interviewed have that experience of that frequent cycle between prison, community, prison. And I used a fragility lens to inform the analysis. As I was interviewing people and talking to some collaborators around what the findings were and what I kept hearing, it was really like, wow, staying on treatment can be really tricky, and how people are navigating that. So that's what I'll be talking about. So some quick participant demographics. I'm not a stats person, so I don't know how to make an interquartile range. But I interviewed 25 men. They'd all completed treatment within prison. As you can see, people injected their first time. That age was quite varied. And then also the location of injection. This was not a question that I asked, but it was interesting when I was looking through the transcripts around people offering up. Oh no, my first time that I injected was in prison, and we have 8 people who made that distinction on their own, and 5 people who clarified that it was in the community. There were a few people that started injecting before their 18th birthday that I would assume was community, but I can't guarantee they weren't in juvenile, so I didn't list that. And then the opioid agonist treatment status. People were either on Buvidal or not, but I just wanted to point out that there was another term that people came at me with when I said, so what, are you on OAT? And I'm on the YARD program. And so what that indicates is that they are actively using, but they're also using in a way in which they're sharing. So to be in the YARD program means that you are out there, you are sharing with people. That's a needle. It might be your own, but it's probably being shared around because that's your access to the drugs. So some quotes. So thinking about how opioid agonist treatment can navigate that risk of reinfection, Hep C reinfection. Somebody's explaining, after I've asked, are you worried that you are going to get reinfected again? No, because I'm on the injections. And somebody else explains, Maddie explains, if I wasn't on Buvidal, I'd be wasting all my money buying Bub and probably sharing injecting equipment. So here we can see that for some people, in some circumstances, that Buvidal can be really helpful, and they feel quite confident that they're not going to be at risk of reinfection. Somebody else talked about navigating that timeline of being able to commence their OAT treatment commencement to be concurrent with their Hep C treatment commencement. And he explains that he was talking to them, and he said, I said for the Hep C treatment, hold off for 3 weeks, because I found out that they were going to be starting OAT in 3 weeks, and just wait for my Hep C for 3 weeks, because I'm probably going to keep using for the next 3 weeks, so just hold off and start me the same day. So I started both of them the same day. And here we see some advocacy happening for people. So they're having to come out and say, this is what I've been able to negotiate with drug and alcohol, this is what I want to negotiate with you as my Hep C nurse, so let's line it up together. And then in terms of being able to access that Buvidal in prison, people really had, this person particularly described a lot of advocating that they had to do. I was on the wait list for at least close to 120 days. I called Justice Health like no less than literally around 30 times. I'd done their heads in, I put forms in, I'd done notes. And then I finally got on it. Biggest mission, I had to do all the work. And so that, again, that's their experience, and that's, how much they've had to put in to get that to happen. And I can imagine being on the receiving end. It was like, oh my God, this guy again, And so it's really that two-way bit, but it's that person's sense of, and maybe they got told every time, your appointment's coming. We don't know. But their experience was, I had to do so much work to make this happen. And then again, that advocacy and negotiating is around, I made a deal with the nurse. So this person had found out about their Hep C, their Hep B, and the damage to their liver. And so they had a big comprehensive health check, and they understood a lot more what was going on with them, and they were quite concerned. And so I made a deal with the nurse, because it was when I found out that I had the Hep C and the Hep B, I said to her, right, you're going to get me on that program, and I won't use. So they were able to use that as a bargaining chip, which we've seen happening in prisons, where, okay, you've just told me I've got Hep C. If you want me to not use and put myself at risk for reinfection, then you've got to do something. In Australia, we don't have those prison needle exchange programs that happen in a few countries elsewhere in the world, looking at Nadine. And then for others, somebody was on the Buvidal injection, but every time he got out, I just got off it. When I got locked up, I tried to get back on the Bub injections, and they told me, no, you can't get back on it. So I've been back to shooting up again. Now, we have no idea why this person's gone off it. We don't know. We don't know why the nurse or whoever it was told them they can't go back on it. But from their perspective, I've been told no, and now I'm putting myself back at risk. And this is how I'm managing my drug use. So in thinking about why people might come off their treatment in the community, it's really not so easy to maintain treatment if you're somebody who is in that cycle of prison, community, prison. I was too paranoid going to get my dose, thinking that coppers were going to be waiting for me, so I relied back on drugs. Have you ever seen officers out waiting, I asked? I really wanted to know, is this a paranoid thing, or is this a real thing that you've visually witnessed? And And they believe that the pharmacy are obligated to tell them that I'm coming in. They'll just wait at the front and grab you. And we know that people have that concern when you talk about injecting centers and the cops waiting out the front because they know you're bringing the drugs in. So it's a fear that we know is out there. On the flip side, this person's experience of their OAT prescriber in the community was, even if I'm on the run, I'll ring the doctor. If I don't make it to clinic, can you send my dose to jail? And they protect you, the clinic. They've got a duty of care to give you a dose. They'll say, oh no, don't come in because the police are around. So those are different experiences that people are communicating around accessing OAT in the community. But I heard several times in these interviews about coming off OAT in the community, and it was because I was on the run. And then when we think about continuity of care, so people are going off the Buvidal, or they're just getting on for it for their first time, but they're coming back on the treatment. And getting that dosing quite right is really tricky. And I'm not an addictions person. I don't know that stuff, so please don't ask me detailed questions about how Buvidal works because I don't know in dosing. But quite often people who were on it were talking about, okay, great, I'm hoping that I'm going to be good till the end of the month, but I don't know. And others talked about, as Maddie here was saying, you know, that's the big risk. People who start to use in their last week because they're not feeling right. So that it's not quite holding them those 4 weeks until their next dose. And so that's going to be a challenge for some people as they navigate that on again, off again with OAT. I just skipped notes, but that's okay. So just in conclusion, so accessing, as we've seen, accessing Buvidal in prison really requires a lot of self-advocacy, and that can be really hard for people in prison. You know, a lot of people have been told that they're not, I'm thinking of lots of terrible words in my head, and I just don't want to say them, but that, you know, they're not a candidate for that kind of care. And so people already are being told terrible things. I've heard a lot about officers, you know, not wanting to support people to come forward for treatment and being quite belittling of people, which can then make it even harder to come forward to get access to care. And we talk about, you know, there are challenges for Buvidal access in the community as well. But when you are in the community, you have a choice of your doctor. You do not have that privilege in prison. And so your fragility to be able to connect with the care that you want and that you need is so limited because you don't have choice. You have what is available to you when it is available to you. And a lot of people in prison that I've spoken to miss out on appointments because they don't know why they've been called up. They've put in the form for the Hep C test, they put in the form for this and that and the other, and then, I don't know, my voice is quaking, sorry. But then, you know, the officer calls them or they get called over the loudspeaker and they don't hear their name or they don't like the officer that's called their name, and so they don't want to come up. And so there's huge missed opportunities around engagement that happens as well. So just this presents a lot of problems when we think about hepatitis C reinfection and going, oh great, we'll put everyone on Buvidal and that'll solve the problem, because it really won't. Yeah, thank you.
We've got 1 minute worthy of questions. Anyone in the audience? No? Okay, I'll ask you one, Lise. What do you plan to do with this work in order to advocate for accelerated access to OAT during incarceration or at the time of release?
I kind of feel like I can do a little bit of advocacy, but there's some key folks in the room who've got some more clout than I do, who are co-authors on this, namely from Justice Health. So I'm gonna lean on them.
We'll tell you later. I think it's just really challenging with the sheer numbers in New South Wales.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm also managed drug and alcohol at population health, and the sheer wait lists. And one of the problems we have is the people who shut out often get first, and
Right.
it's not necessarily where the need is. So
Right.
I think police was very clear about what patients say, and then there's different layers of different realities.
Yeah.
And for us, that's a real challenge to
Yeah.
navigate that too. So
Right.
it's complicated.
It's very complicated, and I was speaking to Tracy before, and there was a quote that I didn't include that will be later available around a lot of people in prison recognize that people want to go on Buvidal in prison because it helps to pass the time, including people who are not opioid dependent. So it's that tricky navigation. So I appreciate that it's
Yeah,
tricky.
the need, determining the need. Yeah. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.